Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Red Devil Experience. How you all doing? We have latest breaking news. Yes, we are already here. Yes, good to see you, Axel. We have latest breaking news. Apparently, Manchester United have held talks with Kieran Mckenna and a couple other representatives as well from Manchester United for the managerial position. It is heating up. It all but seems like Ten Hag is going to be replaced. We're going to get into all that. If you can, real quick, smash the like button for me. Subscribe if you aren't a subscriber. Turn on notifications if you haven't already. And let's just get straight into it. So as you can see here, reported by Sky Sports News in the last hour or so, Manchester United have met with Kieran McKenna's representatives in case they decide to replace Erik Ten Hag after the FA Cup final. McKenna's reps met with Omar Barada and Jason Wilcox last week. And we have a lot of breaking news. More breaking news is still coming out as we speak. So we're going to get to all that, plus all the stuff that I have already lined up in the show. So to follow up with this stuff, here's a couple more things. Ben Jacobs, these are all very credible people. Lawton at the Times. So apparently, Manchester United will only make a decision on Erik Ten Hag after the FA Cup final. They have no plans to discuss and talk about next season before the match at Wembley. And as well as it's being reported that Manchester United have drawn up a 4-man shortlist of managerial candidates should they sack Erik Ten Hag. And that list goes by Mauricio Pochettino, Thomas Tuchel, Kieran McKenna, and Thomas Frank. Obviously, a lot of the news is being centered currently around Kieran McKenna and Tuchel today. The other day was Pochettino. But it's certainly heating up, and I want to know what you guys think about this. Evening, Richard. Good to see you. All of those managerial candidates are a downgrade, Axe Lord is saying. Yeah, I think in certain aspects they are, in certain aspects they might not be, and we'll get into that. But let me run through the news, and then we'll have like a free-for-all discussion. But keep putting in your thoughts in the comments, and I'll read them out. So continuing on to that, we have this update here where Rob Dawson has also from ESPN come out. So I'm just showing you all the different sources to show you, all these news coming from multiple different journalists. This isn't one paper. This isn't one journalist. This isn't, The Sun. This isn't the Daily Mail. These are pretty credible people putting these stories out here. So Manchester United have held informal discussions with the representatives of Thomas Tuchel, Mauricio Pochettino, Kieran McKenna, and Thomas Frank. And as well as Kieran McKenna would favor a move to Manchester United if they formally approach him, as they've only held talks with his representatives. They have not made a formal approach. And this just broke right here, where it says the decision on Erik Ten Hag's future will be based on his 2 years in charge and won't be overly influenced by the result in the FA Cup final. Sources close to Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos insist a decision on Erik Ten Hag has not yet been made and that all options remain open. So that's a pretty big update coming out from Rob Dawson. I don't know who his sources are exactly inside of Manchester United, but that's probably one of the biggest updates that came out today, because everything else is pretty much speculation. Axel Lord saying, being given our situation now with the instability and youth development. Well, before I put that last piece up, I just want to speak on this. And I've seen reaction throughout the fan base on social media and in other forums. And a lot of people are not happy with just even, the general discussion that's going on right now about the fact that we are 2 days out from an FA Cup final. People are not happy about the stories coming out at this time. People are not happy with the fact that if it is true that Manchester United are holding these talks while Ten Hag is still the manager, while we still have an FA Cup to play for. And I think those are all valid concerns and criticisms, if you will. But at the same time, I always like to play a little bit of devil's advocate, because You can have your own opinion and you can view it one way and you can have your belief, and that's always important, right? But at the same time, I always like to try and view things from two sides. Um, I obviously have stated that I would personally choose to keep Eric Ten Hag. I would choose to give him another season and see how it goes. Personally, I think Kieran McKenna has done a very good job. I think Kieran McKenna plays some very good football. Obviously, it's only been in the championship at the highest level. He has not managed a Premier League match at all. And I think it would be too early of a step too soon for him to go from Ipswich Town and not managing a match in the Premier League to going to Manchester United. So it would not be the personal decision that I would make, but at the same time, if I'm trying to look at it from sort of an Ineos perspective, the way I see this is that number one, Eric Ten Hag was not their guy, and I've had these concerns ever since they came in from January. Or before that, it was always probably a concern whoever took over the club, whether it was Ineos or Qatar. Um, these things usually happen where, new people, new owners, or whatever you want to call them, minority owners, they come in and they want their own man. They want their own guy. They don't consider Ten Hag to be their own guy. He was a person hired under the previous regime, under the previous people that were operating this club. And I think Eric Ten Hag's job was always going to be under some sort of threat, regardless of really the performances. I think the performances obviously haven't helped his situation. I think it's sped up their decision to try and look for, or at least talk to other managers and think about replacing him. And like Richard is saying, it's like any business, and it exactly is any business. Regardless, when somebody comes and they buy a company, even if the CEO or the CFO or whoever it is doing a great job, even if the manager is, 20 times maybe employee of the month, most likely or not, usually those people are let go, regardless of whether they're performing well or not, because they were hired by people that no longer are making decisions at that entity. And unfortunately, I think this is something that Ten Hag is going through as well. And I don't think it's part of just the performances. I think it's a little bit of everything mixed together, as well as the fact that, we did get this update here saying that, because I did see concerns that people are like, it's how can they be judging him solely based off of the FA Cup, and I think it's a little bit naive, or a little bit, it would just be foolish of them to do that. And I don't think, these people, based on experience that they have, Jason Wilcox, Omar Barada, even Ratcliffe and Sir David Brailsford, and their time that they took at Nice, I think it would be absolutely foolish. It would be a very naive thing to just, determine the manager's future based off of one result of a FA Cup final. It literally doesn't make sense. This update here from Rob Dawson makes a lot more sense in terms of what they are looking at. Now, obviously, you can make an argument that, Ten Hag's first season went pretty well considering where the position he took us over from, and what he did, and he did win a trophy in his first season. Obviously, the second season hasn't been really good for him, but there are mitigating circumstances, such as suffering 70 injuries, and also, the club not being good at recruiting players like they always have been. And it is what it is. I just want to read out what you guys are saying. Richard saying Kieran McKenna is not coming to United. I would welcome Kieran McKenna, but he could do with another few years at another Premiership job. Well, personally, if I was in Kieran McKenna's shoes, I would probably go and take the Brighton job. To be honest, I think it's the appropriate step up. I think it's not too far of a step up. I think going to Chelsea or going to Manchester United in the current situations that they are, in the current climate that they are in, I think is too big of a jump for Kieran Mckenna. I think it's a huge risk. Doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily fail. He could succeed, but I think the odds are more favored for him to fail than he is to succeed. I think Brighton would be a very good step for him to take and to go into, because it seems like it's right in the middle. You're not going to be at Ipswich, who are most likely to get relegated, continuing the trend of all the teams that get promoted are all the teams that get relegated in the following season. Brighton are a very stable club. They're well established. They have some very good players. They do absolutely great recruitment. They have more money. I think it would be better choice for him to do. At the same time, you know, I wouldn't personally, I wouldn't personally take the gamble. Now, I try to think of what Ineos or things that have been reported that Ineos are sort of saying through the media. And one thing that keeps sticking out in my mind is that they kept saying that they do want like a sort of long-term project. They're looking for 3+ years. Now, the funny thing about this is that we have never given a manager since Ferguson, they have never lasted 3 full seasons. It's either been 1 season, 2 seasons, or about 2.5 seasons. No manager has ever completed 3 full seasons at Manchester United. So my thing is, Ray's in here. How you doing, Ray? So my thing is, if Ineos choose to go down this path, I am prepared to give whoever it is, especially if it's like a Kieran Mckenna, who is a young guy, younger guy. He's less experienced than you would say probably a Tuchel or a Pochettino, for example. I can give the guy 3 years, 3+ years, 3 or 4 years to build something, because I still say we need to build a base, we need to build a foundation. I am concerned with the rest of the fan base, because there are many people out there who, after 1 to 2 seasons of it being crap, or they don't like the football they see, they are ready to turn on the manager that they were championing and holding in high regard, and running around and saying all types of things. They throw the manager under the bus. I mean, a lot of people are doing this to Erik ten Hag right now. There's so many people that were going crazy when Erik ten Hag was the manager, and they wanted him, and they were backing him fully last season, and they were championing him, and it hasn't been great this season. And these guys are absolutely done with him. They've tossed him in the bin. They call him a fraud. They do all types of things that I think is actually very, very disgraceful to treat a manager that way, especially only being here 2 seasons with the mitigating circumstances. So it is a very difficult situation. It's not an easy situation. I see both sides of the of how you can go in this direction. But I it's I don't know what is the actual correct way. I mean, the people like us that want Ten Hag to be giving another season at least, we could be 100% right. We could be 100% right. Or we could be wrong. We could be wrong. Maybe this is maybe going down this route with another manager, maybe that ends up being a better decision. Obviously we're gonna have our opinions about it and reasons why as to what we think is gonna lead to the best results, but we don't actually know. And part of me, I want Ten Hag, but part of me also can understand the fact of why Ineos are looking to try and go down this route. And if I'm listening to what Ineos are saying, they've mentioned that they want the manager to be 3+ years. Kieran Mckenna is a young coach, right? He fits more of that Arteta, Xabi Alonso like type of thing, where they're fairly new. Yes, they are inexperienced, but they're also fairly young. And you can kind of, I guess, build with that. Richard saying here, I never wanted Eric Ten Hag, but I will support him because he manages my club. I agree many of those who did want him are now saying Eric out. I am beginning to think this is a generational thing. Yeah, I think it's more exacerbated with the fact of like social media. Because that's where, unfortunately, that's where a lot of the interaction comes nowadays. It's a lot of online things. Obviously, there's benefits because, like us, we can have our discussions and it's online as well. But what I'm saying is, like, when you see these people put out opinions, first of all, a lot of them, they don't have a face on their social media account. Um, it's either a player or some logo because they're trying to create a brand that they're like some Manchester United account or fan. And unfortunately, these are the people that you get the opinions from. You can't actually sit down and have a conversation or a full conversation. Um, but the thing that upsets me is that these people that do have these fairly large social accounts with a fairly large social following, the length of or where they take it to is actually very disgusting in my opinion. I mean, I've literally seen people like calling this guy a fraud and championing him to get sacked and almost celebrating it, and like every time there's like a piece of news coming out, Manchester United have held discussions with this person's representatives or Tuchel or whatever. Like there are people that are literally championing every single almost every single person that has been linked with Manchester United's job, and it's fairly disgusting. Like you don't have to you you can want a change in manager, but the way that they're going about it is very like it's very shallow. It's very shallow, especially because I know these people backed Eric Ten Hag. They wanted Eric Ten Hag. They backed him last season, and it all took one season for them to throw this guy completely under the bus in a disgraceful manner. It's okay to be Ten Hag out if that's what you want, and if you have like valid reasons, like if you don't like the way the football is necessarily being played, or maybe you don't like some of the decisions, or maybe you don't think, you know, there's valid reasons for not wanting Eric Ten Hag, and that's okay. But it's the way these people go about it that's very just it's not my taste. It's not the way I would handle it. I don't see it as very professional. I don't see it as being a proper fan of the football club. The way these people go about it, it's I football is all about opinions 100%, but it's like these people, they go online and it's like they over exaggerate the opinions, or they be like super hypercritical because they're trying to get more attention and they want more things for their accounts. So it just adds like unnecessary. It's not. I almost view it as it's not genuine opinions. Like I almost don't. There's certain people on there I don't take their opinions seriously. There's one guy I've actually been clipping up all his tweets because I swear this guy, I've been following this guy, and he has a large he has a large following, and this guy has completely done a 180 on Eric Ten Hag. He now hates Eric Ten Hag. He doesn't want Eric Ten Hag to continue here. And he's championing every single man. Every time Tuchel's name is linked, he's putting up pictures of Tuchel saying, "Bring me my manager." He's putting up pictures of Kieran Mckenna saying, "Super Mckenna, bring me my manager." So, I'm just clipping him up because just in case we do change the manager and it doesn't go necessarily well, somebody like that, in my opinion, deserves to get exposed for just being a complete and utter flip flop. This guy doesn't, have any real core values or real opinions. He's just doing it just to get clicks, just to be what it is. But we're gonna go back to the football discussion at hand. And just to Richard's point on never wanting Eric Ten Hag, I did want Eric Ten Hag. I thought Eric Ten Hag was the best candidate possible. I was very against Mauricio Pochettino. I thought Eric Ten Hag was better than Mauricio Pochettino at the time, and I still think that probably Eric Ten Hag is better than Mauricio Pochettino right now. Um, but at the end of the day, it's really out of my control and your control, and Ineos are going to do what they're going to do. And if they choose to go down the route and replace him, there's nothing we could really do about it. Obviously, we could voice our opinions. We can be upset about it. But at the end of the day, we're probably going to have to, get behind the new manager then and see what that brings. And, I'm just trying to keep an open mind about it. Because we don't know what's actually going to happen. And, I'm preparing. I do feel like with every day that's going, coming more forward, that it does seem like it's more increasingly likely that Erik ten Hag will be leaving Manchester United. It's just a feeling I'm getting from everything that keeps coming out. Now, Erik ten Hag did do a press conference today. The way he spoke did not seem like a guy that knows that he's going to get sacked. Does not seem like a guy that has made a decision to part ways with the club in a mutual sense. He did say that he is working on transfers, but he's obviously focusing on the FA Cup right now. But he has done some work on transfers, and I think it's certainly a fairly confusing situation. Maybe he doesn't actually know. Maybe he held certain talks. Maybe Ineos are keeping it in their back pocket. I would say this though: if Ineos do decide to get rid of him, one thing I think that people, or a large majority of the fan base can't really complain about is, and I've seen this over time. A lot of our fans have asked for the management to be ruthless. And I think if they go down this path and they do what they do, I think I would consider it to be fairly ruthless. Now, a lot of people want them to be ruthless with the players. And I think if Ineos do decide to go down this path and change the managers, they have to, be ruthless with the players. If they are ruthless with the manager and then don't follow up with the ruthlessness of the players, they will lose the majority of the fan base immediately. And I think they should be aware of that, at least hopefully, and they're not naive. But if they're not aware of that, they need to be aware of that because their goal is obviously to have the fans behind them and back them. If they don't do that, the fans will not be behind them. They will lose the trust of the fans very, very quickly, and people will not be backing them. And I've already seen a lot of comparisons where people are saying that this is very similar to the Glazers. I think it's a little bit too early to say that, solely for the fact of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, where that they just starting out and they were always going to want to grab their own guy. And, they did not hire Erik ten Hag. So while I understand Erik ten Hag would be sacked after only 2 seasons, and it is a continuation almost of how the Glazers were operating, it's a little bit unfair to label it that way because these guys did not hire Erik ten Hag. Now, the manager that they go forward with, if they're saying that they want a 3+ year project, they hired this guy and they sack him within a year or 2 years, then I think it's a fair criticism to come and say, well, these guys have not changed anything. They're operating the same way or very similar to how the Glazers were operating or under Richard Arnold and Ed Woodward, for example. Axe Lord in here saying Ferdinand Carragher and Owen are also toxic for Man United. I mean, listen, Carragher can say whatever the hell Carragher wants. He's an ex-Liverpool player. Those guys are always going to be around. They're always going to say shit. They're always going to talk shit. And I don't think, as much as Carragher is like listened to and talked about, I don't think Carragher speaking about like United does as much damage when they do it in a toxic or negative way. I don't think it does anywhere close to the amount of damage as it does when a Rio does it, or a Roy Keane, or a Gary Neville, because these are not only ex-players, but they are absolute legends of the club. They are looked up to And especially if you are Manchester United players, and probably some more than others. For example, like, if you come through the U team, like a Rashford or something, you've probably always looked up to Roy Keane, Gary Neville, Rio Ferdinand, basically your whole life since you were like, a kid at the club, and you come through. I think that has a negative impact on our players, and I think it's certainly a problem that we have a lot of our legends on a lot of different media outlets. Scholes is on another one, Hargreaves, but Hargreaves is usually pretty fair, and he's not too bad with it. Um, but yeah, we have a lot, and I don't really like it, to be honest, because I think they talk too much, way too often. I would like to hear from our legends every now and then, but they are literally like the main men on these things, and we hear too often from them. Um, so I wish that would kind of go away, but I don't see that happening. Richard was saying, you can no longer have a discussion with someone who has a different opinion in a civil manner. Oh no, yeah, that's also a problem with today's society, right? Like, it's just, if you have a different opinion, you're the worst person, you're 100% wrong, or you have no intelligence, or when it's crazy, or that person holds a different opinion than me, so therefore they are the enemy, and I have to completely hate them, and I have to completely go against everything they say. It's pretty crazy. Ray saying Eric Ten Hag was in better than McKenna 2 years ago. Something goes wrong and we go for the manager's head. We keep going this way, changing every 2 years. Ray been doing this for the last 11 years, 6 managers. And then Richard said, to Ray, you are probably correct, Ray, but my hesitation in wanting him was based on the fact that no Dutch manager has ever been a title winner in the Premiership, which is actually a valid fact there. Well, but this is what I'm getting at. Like, I do understand that, obviously, I think, 2 years ago, obviously Ten Hag was better than McKenna, and he probably still is, in certain ways. And there's obviously a lot of hype around McKenna because he's gained promotion twice in 2 years, back to back, and also, because he's doing it in England, his football is the style of football he has them playing is very, very hyped up. Um, you know, the problem is what I'm saying is, and while we have been doing this for the last 11 years, we've had 6 managers. The problem where I sit on this is that this was always going to probably happen regardless, unless Eric Ten Hag was literally challenging for the Premier League title. Um, because I just always felt that, like, these guys coming in, they were always going to look to get their own guy. I mean, we've seen it at Chelsea. Now, I think where Chelsea have gone wrong is that they have continued to be crazy, and, like, they've sacked like 6 managers in like a year and a half. Well, no, like 2 years, right? Like, they've gone through so many managers in the shortest amount of time. I think Ineos needs, if they make this decision, right? Ineos need to stick. This is why it's a big and important decision as well. Ineos need to stick with whoever they pick. So if they pick McKenna, they have to give McKenna like 3 to 4 years, regardless of results. If they are going to do a proper if they're going to do a proper rebuild, if they're going to have a proper structure, they would have to stick with this guy regardless of results. Kind of to what Arsenal did with Arteta, right? They finished 8th back to back, and it really took the 3rd year for them to really go into it. And the 4th year, they've improved on top of the 3rd year, and they are now considered, Premier League title challenges or contenders. Everybody expects Arsenal to be in that race again going into next season. Arteta is there, right? And they have to go down that route. If they hire somebody like McKenna and they sack him after a year or 2 years, they don't even give him the full 3 seasons. Then we certainly have an issue on our hand, and then it definitely is a problem where we can start to really criticize Ineos and say, well, they know better than the Glazers because they're not offering any type of stability at the club. But I think this was always going to be an issue that Ten Hag was going to lose his job at some point, because he's not their guy. He's not their guy. And while people don't agree with that, that's it's just how it works. I mean, me and Richard said it before. It's just standard pretty much business in any business. And it's happened at a lot of different football clubs as well. It's not just here. It's not just at Chelsea. It's happened at many different clubs. Also, if we talk about the project that Ineos are looking to go to, football in an aspect in many different clubs, if you're looking across what's going on at many different clubs, they seem to be wanting to get in managers that are more like coaches who are just there to really really just focus on the squad, managing the squad, and not being so involved in every other aspect of the club like how Ferguson used to be, or Klopp or Guardiola. Now, I'm not completely against that. I think you need that anyway in a certain aspect, and I think um depending on the manager you have or the manager you can get, it's probably the correct way to go unless a certain manager comes about, right? Like, I think you can change that slightly if you were to get an Ancelotti, if you had a Pep. But as I mentioned before, there's not too many of these managers out there. Therefore, if you can't get one of those managers, I don't think you should be operating in the way that these other clubs that have those managers do. And even with Liverpool also seemed to be going down this route as well, with now getting in Arnie Slot. That he is going to obviously probably have less power than what Klopp has had at his time at Liverpool. And, they're going to have their board um, pretty much running a lot of the bigger decisions. And I don't think it's more of like, I've seen some people say like, oh, they want a puppet that they can control. And I don't think it's as far as a puppet. I don't think, that wouldn't work. If you were to just get somebody that they would be like, yeah, who is a guy that we can totally 100% control and is a puppet? That's not going to work. So if they choose to do that, it's just moronic. I think it is okay to have a manager that is basically more solely focused on just the team aspect itself, and then have everybody else do the work, and then have the manager come in and have some input. Like, you do all the scouting and the recruiting, you break it down to maybe about like 3 players for a certain position. You go speak with the manager and say, listen, this is what we've got nailed down. Who do you want? And then obviously the manager could pick the player out of the 3 players that he wants, and then they go and they have a discussion maybe as a group or maybe all together, and then they make a decision on the player to recruit. Rajat, good to see you. How you doing? Let me see what you guys are saying in here. So Richard was saying, the same people who wanted Moyes out wanted Louis van Gaal. The same crowd wanted van Gaal out. I don't shout for any manager to get sacked because in '69 I was shouting, and in '89 I was shouting Ferguson out. Yeah, and you know what? Like, I won't do it either because of just the fact that I've always held the belief. It was pretty much after Mourinho, I guess. At that current point at Manchester United, I was still holding the belief that we just needed the manager. We just needed the proper manager, and we could win. We could do something. It wasn't until after pretty much Mourinho got sacked that my eyes got opened to how poorly this club was running beyond the manager. And ever since then, my focus has always been less on the manager. That's so I can never really be like, get this guy out, get him sacked. I don't want him. I hate him. It's his fault because it's there's the other things that need to be addressed at the club are so much more important than the manager. At the end of the day, and this goes hand in hand with the way football is moving, the manager should not be the be all and end all. I think football has kind of basically pretty much moved on from that, whether people like it or not. I think it's moved on from that. Um, and I don't think it's gonna go back to that anytime soon. Uh, but you know, I think just I almost lost the chat, but I think just like if the manager is sacked, it is what it is. I almost hold the opinion of right now it doesn't even almost really matter who the manager is because we need to fix everything else anyway. Um, Part of me thinks that way. But at the same time, it is important to have somebody there to at least build something because I think we don't have a real foundation, and we need to start and build a foundation. Then move on from the foundation, and then you can really worry about who is in charge of all players at the club. Who is the manager? Because the foundation should be solid enough that you can move around managers or replace managers, and maybe one manager might be able to take the club up a little bit higher than another manager, and might be able to accomplish more. Um, but yeah, Richard's right there. It's always the same people pretty much. Especially for me on social media, I've seen them. There's always a certain group of people. Um, they scream and shout to the heaven tops for a manager to get sacked. They scream and shout to the heaven tops for a certain guy to get hired. Um, the guy gets hired, and within a year and a half, they're very displeased and they want the manager out. And they always focus on the manager going out instead of all the other problems. And I just never understand it. It's always a circus, a merry-go-round. Axe Lord saying, I feel frustrated because changing Hag will mean we throw away the last 2 years, and we have been doing this over and over again. And I understand that point, and that is valid. Um, the argument against that would probably be with everything that we have changing around the club, it's in terms of like CEO getting a sporting director, building a proper hierarchy. um there is an argument to be made that you might have to do that. You might have to throw away the last 2 years. Maybe they feel like, and I don't feel like you're throwing everything away over the last 2 years, right? Like the development of Manu and Garnacho, and we have Rasmus. You're not, but we're not going to throw those things away. Those things aren't going to get thrown away, right? Um, but certain aspects, maybe in like the certain direction the club was moving, those things do get abandoned and they go in a different direction. And maybe that is something that we have to do though. Whether we want it or not. Maybe that is the best way to go down. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here and trying to look at it from a different perspective. But maybe that is what we have to do because we do have a new CEO, we do have a new sporting director, we do have a new, you know, we do have a new setup. So that's certainly some of the arguments for getting in a new manager is like, well, this is a new direction the club is supposed to be going in. This is supposed to be a new project, and it would probably properly fit to get a new manager as well. Um, but I still think Ten Hag should get another season. I would like to get him another season. I think what he showed us in the first season he did. Um, I think there was grounds or that he can obviously do something with this squad. He showed what he could do with that squad that was in his first season. And obviously, there's been a lot of setbacks, and a lot of them haven't been his fault this season. And I think it's a little bit ridiculous, to just And that's where I get caught up on, is just like the hate that Eric Ten Hag is getting from certain people that are supposed to be United fans. I just don't understand it, because it's like, you know the injuries, you know that the club operates incompetently, you know everything about this club, and yet you have decided to buckle down and hate this manager more than anything else at the club, and that's the perspective I do not understand. I just don't understand that. Richard saying, when the current owners at City took over, Mark Hughes had City in third, but he still got replaced. Well, but yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. And also, they did replace him with a manager who you would who was it? Pellegrini, or was it Pellegrini or Mancini that they replaced him with? But you would probably say either one of those guys was a better manager than Mark Hughes. But um but they still built some type of a base, and that's kind of what I look at. Like they took it, they had a certain base, they built a little bit more on top of that base, then they got, Mancini, then they built more, and then they moved on to their final, or their greatest piece that they could put in there, which was Pep Guardiola, because he was already an exceptional manager. But they built the base, they built the base, they built the base, and then an opportunity was presented to them to get Guardiola, and that was like icing on top of the cake, pretty much. They built the base of the cake, they made multiple layers, multiple layers, multiple layers, and then right when they were getting towards the end, they found the perfect piece to put at the top of the cake, and they put it on there, and that was Guardiola. And that's kind of how I'm seeing it here, is that whatever they get, and this is why I'm saying it doesn't even necessarily probably matter too much about the manager, but they need to provide the environment for whoever the manager is to build a base and do a good job in the next 3 or 4 years, and then probably get another manager if an opportunity presents itself to take the next level up. Um, you know, um, Ray saying, give Eric Ten Hag his real players. He can take us to the top, not take 2 months to get someone and overpay at the end of it. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're gonna see. We're gonna see the business, right? We're gonna see what happens. Rajat was saying, why downgrade to McKenna for a club like Manchester United? Um, well, yeah, if you consider it a downgrade, like I said in the beginning, um, big up Rajat for being in here as well. Um, you consider it a downgrade, which, you know, I accept it. Um, it would probably be for the reason of that he is a younger manager. And Ineos have stated that they want a manager for the next 3+ years, and to build out their current vision for their project. Um, you know, so it might be a downgrade. But it might fit their plans better, I guess. But to be fair to Kieran McKenna, as far as, obviously he's inexperienced, so we can't like 100% judge him or compare him. Um, but he did have them playing some exceptional, really good football. He does play certain formations and stuff like that. And even when he was at our club, he was highly regarded anyway. He was just lumped in with Solskjaer and the coaching staff, which obviously that turned sour. So he might, maybe, to even put it to this point, he might seem like a downgrade right now. But what if he comes in and he does an exceptional job? um, then the perception would change and he wouldn't be considered a downgrade anymore. But we don't actually know, you know what I mean? Because we don't know what's going to happen. He might not even become the manager. He might end up going to Chelsea, because Chelsea are looking at him too. Um, Richard saying the blue moon is going to fall and the red sun is going to rise. Yeah, at some point. Listen, these idiots over there with their blue moon, they think that it's gonna last a lifetime. They don't understand that everything is temporary. Um, they don't understand where Ten Hag did say eras do come to an end. Eras do come to an end. If you look through any period in history, every single era has ever ended. No matter who was dominating that world, it does fall at the end and somebody else does rise. So, you know, theirs will only be coming around eventually. Rajat, saying he hates the journalism from England when they ask ridiculous questions like this in your final match. Yeah, they always do that, and I don't like the British media either. They're very they ask, in my opinion, they do ask ridiculous questions. They also ask very stupid questions. And I hate it. I hate it. They ask questions that fans don't want. They don't even want. That's not what they want to hear. That's not, if you put in 100 fans in there, 99 and a half of those fans are not going to ask that question. It's not a question that they want to hear the answer to. It's not a question that they want to hear the manager answer. They probably have a bunch of other questions that they would rather have them ask, and of course they're not going to ask it because, to be fair, at the end of the day, unfortunately, to the personal journalist, right, the human being that is their job to do that job, they work for a publication and they are pretty much forced to ask those questions. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you remember, but when Ronaldo, we had that thing with Ronaldo, and it was preseason, and every single journalist asked Ten Hag like 70 times, "Oh, what about Ronaldo? What about Ronaldo?" Um, a lot of those journalists didn't want to ask after like the first three people, but they were forced to ask because of who their employer is, and that's usually how it goes too. So just trying to be fair to that. Um, Mancini came 2009, 2010. Like a house of crap foundation, how is it going to work with no solid foundation? Well, that's what I'm saying. You need to build the foundation. And they are looking to build a foundation. That's why they are looking to build with a new manager. Um, it is in of their opinion that they want their own guy. And maybe they, based on what they're planning to do, somebody else. One of the targets that they have identified, which is here, which is Manchester, which is between Thomas Tuchel, Pochettino, Kieran McKenna, and Thomas Frank. I mean, out of those four, I definitely 110% would be absolutely against Thomas Frank. I would absolutely be against Thomas Frank. Tuchel, Pochettino, and McKenna, I would be very indifferent to it. I would not be 100% confident in it, but I would see where it goes. And obviously, I would back the guy to do a good job. I think Thomas Frank would be a huge mistake. I think Thomas Frank, I just would not want that. Thomas Frank, Gareth Southgate, and Graham Potter, those three, absolutely not. I would lose my shit if it was any one of them. Again, I would stay with Eric Ten Hag, but you know, um, I just wouldn't do it. Now, something that I didn't pop up on the screen that we could talk about right here. This also broke from Rob Dawson, shortly a little bit ago, where Eric Ten Hag turned down the vacant Bayern Munich job due to his desire to stay at Manchester United. So, that would kind of suck for Eric Ten Hag if he does end up getting sacked, because he could have went to Bayern Munich. He turned down the Bayern Munich job. But he had the opportunity to walk from Manchester United, according to Rob Dawson, if this is accurate. Because he wants to stay at Manchester United and he wants to continue with the project that he already started. Um, so I would actually, if this is 100% true, I would feel even more bad for Eric Ten Hag, because that's just so messed up that they strung him along all the way here. He declined a job at Bayern Munich to try and stay at Manchester United because he wanted to stay at Manchester United, and he ends up getting the sack, and then he pretty much ends up jobless because Bayern Munich have moved on. Ajax have hired a new manager. The only team that would probably be left would actually be Chelsea. or Barcelona. Um, Now, there's probably a clause in Eric Ten Hag's contract about going to another Premier League team, so I don't think he would end up at Chelsea unless he's feeling some type of way and he wants to break that or whatever. Would it be something financial or something like that? Um, but yeah, that would be kind of crazy. Axelord was saying Axelord said in the chat, the way this club has been doing, I would expect them to hire Ten Hag again in 3 to 4 years. I don't know. Maybe I am fatalistic. Um, nah, that's more like how Bayern Munich are moving. Bayern Munich have been moving like that. Bayern Munich literally had, in my opinion, hey, is this voice from New York or New Jersey? New York. If you couldn't tell, yeah, it's a little bit mixed. I had somebody call me Brooklyn. I'm not from Brooklyn, but they said it was like a Brooklyn accent from the movies and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a New York thing. 100%. I know it's very heavy. I called in to one of the guys that they do content like this. A couple of the British guys. If you're familiar with Terry Flowers, who runs the football terrace, I called in once or twice. And they immediately knew right away. They called me out on it before I could even say anything. They're like, "Where are you from? New York?" I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Ah, I could tell with the accent." They were laughing about it, and they were making fun of me for it, but it was all good. Um, but let me just check the internet real quick because there was quite a lot of updates as I was going live. So I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything as I was here speaking to you guys. Um so here's a poll with about 6,000 votes that are supposed to be Manchester United fans from a very big account, a Manchester United account, aggregator account, and they said according to Time Sport, Manchester United have drawn up the four-man shortlist, which we already mentioned, between Pochettino, Tuchel, McKenna, and Frank, and they want people to vote on who they would prefer as the manager. I think it's actually a disgrace that they left out Eric Ten Hag, and it's not going to accurately represent the fan base. But I would like to see who they're voting for, so I'm going to click on it, and I will read this out to you. So out of 6,000 people that have voted, Mauricio Pochettino has 15.6%. Thomas Tuchel has 35.7%. Kieran Mckenna is leading with 44.1%, and Thomas Frank has 4.6%, which I'm actually not surprised about at all, and that seems pretty accurate to me in the way that it would go. Thomas Frank, obviously, I don't know who the hell is voting for Thomas Frank's. Probably like a Liverpool fan or some Liverpool troll or something. McKenna is obviously the hottest topic right now, and he's been at United, so it would make sense because he seems to be the more popular option. And Pochettino is way less than Tuchel because we already rejected Poch once, and I think fans are over that now. Let me just check. Yeah, I think it's crazy that and there's a lot of these accounts are doing the same type of polls, man. They're putting out Pochettino's Red Army, Tuchel's Red Army, McKenna's Red Army, Frank's Red Army, and this is where I get disappointed because it's like these big accounts are sort of pushing this on the rest of the fan base. I think if they gave them an option between all four of these people and Ten Hag, I still believe that Ten Hag is actually would be leading the poll, but they're not doing that, and it's like they're pushing, they're aiding in the pushing of the support for him to be replaced or sacked. um and I just don't agree with that. I feel like when you have such a large following and a large voice, like, you have a responsibility to be like, um but why are you trying to manipulate people into going the route that you want them to go? You were supposed to be more impartial. Why are you manipulating a large portion of people to do such things? Be responsible with your voice. I never understood this from these people. Like, Um, but at this point, the way I feel about it, it looks like Ten Hag's final game could very well be the FA Cup final on Saturday. With United holding talks with McKenna's representatives, that's coming from Sky, and then as well as Tuchel, Poch, and Frank from ESPN. Ineos have had the big meetings last week with Wilcox and the rest of the people that they have brung in, where they discussed Ten Hag and the manager role, likely making a final decision. If they are now meeting with other managers' representatives, it indicates they have decided to part ways with Ten Hag if they secure their preferred manager. I don't think Ineos would announce anything unless they were sure their target would accept the job. They don't want to be in a Bayern Munich situation, begging Ten Hag to come back if they get turned around, which is also a pretty good way to think about it. I mean, it is a theory, obviously, and it's based off of reports, and um, but yeah, I think it's definitely a very possible thing that can happen. Um, and we're gonna have to see. What are you guys saying in here? What is your opinion about Roberto De Zerbi as a coach? Well, Roberto De Zerbi, I think he plays some good football. I think even in the match, where we played Brighton on the last day of the season, I think Brighton played pretty well to a certain extent. Obviously hasn't gone too well for him in the season that he just finished. Um and probably, if you ask me, which is funnily enough because they didn't even mention him in there, but over these four, right? Where would I put him? I mean, if I had to pick one, realistically, if I was forced to pick somebody, I really don't like Tuchel. I really, I don't know. I just never liked him before. He was ever linked to Manchester United. I never liked him at PSG. I never liked him at Dortmund. I never liked him at Chelsea. I never liked him at, I just never really favored the guy. I would probably, if I was forced to take one, I would probably go with the McKenna De Zerbi, to be honest, over Tuchel, Pochettino, and Thomas Frank. He wouldn't even be considered an option for me. I wouldn't even look at the guy. Um, but again, I would prefer for Eric Ten Hag to stay on. Um, I would stay with Eric Ten Hag. But if I was forced to take one of these guys, I would probably choose between McKenna and De Zerbi, and then I would go down the path of giving De Zerbi or McKenna. And I think De Zerbi would probably be the better choice because De Zerbi has actually managed in the Premier League. But I don't know. Um, they would get a minimum from me 3 to 4 years, regardless of position, um, in the club, as long as progress is being made in terms of building the squad properly. If we are building the squad out properly and we're making improvements in certain areas, but we're not finishing, let's say, in the top four, um, exactly, you would still have to give them the time. And that's probably how I would go about it. Um, Richard, completely against De Zerbi and would stick with Eric Ten Hag. Well, yeah, I would stick with Eric Ten Hag. But if you had to pick one, I guess out of the guys that are being linked with us, and then you think De Zerbi's going to Chelsea. Well, I did see the story that Brighton agreed to lower from the 10 million to the 5 million. I kind of feel like it might be a club from outside the Premier League because I feel like if it was in the Premier League, why would they lose the 5 million? Why not just go for the 10 million when it's gonna go directly against you? He's gonna be competing directly against you. So you know, I I, I I don't know if that's true or not either, but we talking about the game we have on Sunday, we talking about a manager. Yeah, I mean, but there really isn't much. There really isn't much more to talk about the match until the match happens. There's been all the build up. Obviously, the players are pretty much all back, except for Maguire and Luke Shaw. Um, I'm more for we already really talked about it. I'm more for speaking about it after it happens, and whatever happens happens. But why Bayern Munich are hiring company? Because they're stupid. And this is what I'm saying. I think you can use company for Bayern. Football is changing. Is that like confirmed right now though? Is that something that is that something that because I did see that they are going for him, but like, are you saying like it just broke now or? But what I was gonna say is on Bayern Munich, that is something. What they have done is something you don't want to do. And is something that Ineos should not do and cannot do. I don't think they can afford it. Yeah, other than getting Burnley 19th place, but that's besides the point. The bigger picture, Rajat. I first of all, they had Nagelsmann, who I thought was a really good coach, and actually, if he was available, he would probably be my preference as a manager at Manchester United. I would 100% take Julian Nagelsmann. I really liked the guy. I liked what he was doing. I thought it was the dumbest, stupidest move for them to fire him because I don't even think he did that bad at Bayern Munich. And he's a fairly young coach, but he's fairly good for being a fairly young coach. Um, I I always felt like he needed more time. I felt like if they gave him another season or two, they probably would have got them performing absolutely brilliantly. They sacked him to get Thomas Tuchel in, to basically essentially sack Thomas Tuchel like 6 months in or like halfway through the season, even though he stayed on, but they already made an agreement that he was leaving at the end of the season, right? To then not have a preferred target, or they did have a preferred target, but they made that decision of getting rid of Tuchel before they even had the guy to replace him with. They then had like 4 or 5 months to get somebody in, and they literally could not get anybody in. They actually went back to Nagelsmann, practically begged him to come back, and Nagelsmann gave him one of these and said, I'm signing, and signed an extension with Germany. They tried to get Ralph Rangnick. Ralph Rangnick obviously doesn't mess about, had conversations with them, didn't like what they were offering, probably in terms of he didn't have enough control and he wanted more say. So he told them, screw off, I'm staying, right? And who else did they go for? It was somebody. Oh, they tried to get Xabi Alonso, right? He rejected them as well. Said I'm staying at Leverkusen. And they've run out of all their options, and now they've decided to go with the guy that is not only is he inexperienced, but he's just gotten relegated with Burnley in the Premier League. And I don't understand. Yeah, Flick is good too. I would take Flick too if we were looking at him, but I don't think we are. But you understand what I'm saying? Look at the process that Bayern Munich just went through. It's complete idiocy. It's moronic. Ineos cannot do that. So if they choose to change the manager, they have to stick with him. Which is why it's a huge deal if they do go down this path. They have to stick with him. Why didn't they get Amorim? Yeah, I mean, but that's also another thing. They probably could have. Maybe they didn't want to pay. Because I know Liverpool were looking at him. But obviously there's something with the financials going on in there, and it made Liverpool move away from it as well. I don't know. Yes, if they make the right appointment, but this is what I'm saying. But even, I mean, but what would you consider the wrong, like, at what point do you say what is the right appointment, what's the wrong appointment, when we literally probably have to start from the bottom and build something? Like if you get a McKenna and he's fairly inexperienced, I expect maybe like the first 1 or 2 seasons to not be the greatest in terms of probably league position. Um, but there would probably have to be other things. Like if he comes and he implements a direct and very positive style of play, and we play some very attractive football, and it's attacking and it's exciting, he probably has a leg to probably stand on, to keep him going. I mean, to be fair to Arteta, that's kind of what he did, right? He had the idea, he had the philosophy, he had the style of football. He played it in a certain aspect. Now, while they weren't getting the results that they needed to get for those first 2 seasons, right? You could see it. You could see it, and at times it was good, and at times it was shit. The same thing was for Klopp when he first came in. You could see what Klopp was trying to do. There was performances where they performed well. There was performances where it was absolutely garbage, and that was obviously down to personnel and playing and all, and players and stuff like that. And obviously, once they got rid of the players that didn't fit that way, and they got in players that fit in the way that they were trying to move, it got better and better. So for me, if we do go with this young manager and this younger guy, then I would have to say you have to take at least the first couple of seasons, and I'm willing to do that. I've always been willing to do that. I've always tried to give any manager the longest period of time to try and turn things around, but the club has to be operating correctly as well. Axel is saying second season of McKenna may be worse than this one. It could be too as well. Managers, no matter who they are, never given enough time. Look at Unai at Emery, at Arsenal, then Villa. And yeah, and the thing about Emery too was that Arsenal weren't even operating in the same way that they did once Arteta came there. They kind of changed what was going on upstairs and who was in charge and the moves that they were making after they sacked Emery and Arteta came in. And it wasn't even immediately. It was probably like a season in to Arteta being there, which has obviously helped Arteta for his vision and his project, which is what I'm saying has to go hand in hand. So, we really have to nail things down. And I mean, like, obviously Emery's done a very good job basically immediately coming into Villa, but I think Villa, in terms of their project and what they had going on, I think Villa already had a solid base for what they had going on. They bring in an Unai Emery who was a step up from who they had, and that just elevated them. But when I look at Manchester United, not because of Erik ten Hag, but because of the way the club has operated the past 11 years, I don't see that solid base. And I think this is also a problem that Ineos are looking at, because Ineos are like, they might see it as we don't actually have a solid base. And while it's not all Erik ten Hag's fault, if we are to build a solid base, we need the manager to stay on to 3 more years. They might not fancy Erik ten Hag to be the guy for the next 3 years. And that might be one of the conflicts going on internally. And maybe that's why they're looking to replace him, because it's not necessarily about giving him one more season. It would be more about like the next 3 seasons. And what if it doesn't improve? What if it gets worse? It could improve, it could get better, and then everything would be fine. But if it doesn't, they might be viewing it as, well, we just wasted 1 more season. We just wasted 1 more year while everybody got better. We didn't get better, or we could have got even more better and made up lost ground, or we could have been 1 year into our project. So, there's gives and takes on both sides. Listen, I am gonna have to end in about 5 minutes because I have something I gotta go take care of. But I'm gonna read out whatever we got going on here real quick. If everybody could smash the like button for me, I see some extra people in here. Bebe is in here. Good to see you, buddy. I would greatly appreciate that. Really helps us out. And subscribe if you're not a subscriber. So what are you guys saying in here? Rajat was saying would take Luis Enrique. Don't know whether that's a good call or Emery too. Yeah, but Luis Enrique ain't leaving PSG, right? He's over there. But maybe next season. I don't know. But I actually I don't think Luis Enrique would come to Manchester United. Especially now. I think the way the project is going, I think the way things are going, Luis Enrique seems like one of those guys that butts heads too much. He's a very strong, opinionated man. He makes very, at times, I guess you would say, controversial decisions. Um, and I don't think that would probably work well at Manchester United, even though I do think he is a good manager in regards to that. Abebe said that I want to Thomas Tuchel to United is better. So you want Thomas Tuchel? You think Thomas Tuchel to United would make United better? Um, I mean, it is a possibility. I don't see that. Because I've never liked Tuchel. Um, and I would probably think it probably wouldn't succeed. I would probably go I would probably go in the aspect of I would probably take I would rather take the gamble on a Kieran McKenna or a De Zerbi than go with a Tuchel. Because I've seen what Tuchel has to offer at all these different clubs he's been at. And I just don't think it's like I I think you could achieve more than that. Um, so I'd rather take the gamble on that. But Richard Hawkins, I've already said I wanted Ferguson at 89. How wrong was I? Yeah, I mean, but a lot of us said the same thing when we asked for Mourinho's head. Um, and majority of the fan base, sided with the players, and pretty much after Solskjaer, and the way that went down, a lot of us came back, including myself, and we also admitted that we were wrong for taking the players' sides over Mourinho. Mourinho was pretty much correct in basically almost everything he said, and it was the players that really needed to have the look at and have the blame. But we did not give him that at that time. Um, and 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 that's when I really started looking solely not at the manager, because I was always in that mindset of the manager's the manager. If if things go to shit, it's always the manager. The manager controls everything, and that's just not the case. And especially now, we keep going down the line in years of football that these things, it's really changing, and it's really, a lot of the things are really going out of the manager's hands, and it really is going more power to the people up above the manager. um so we're gonna have to see where we go from there. um I might pop up tomorrow, and just we'll do maybe like a little preview on the FA Cup final, and we'll talk more about that, and maybe we'll put in a couple topical news, um, if we got some time. If not, obviously we'll have the Red Devil recap live and ready to go as soon as the FA Cup final is over on Saturday. So that'd be great. So again, thank you to everybody that tuned in. Thank you to everybody that got involved in the chat. Andrew Frost, Richard Hawkins, Rajat V, Axe Lord, Ray. Um, Anybody else that I missed in here? I think that's everybody from today. Yeah, thank you guys for all getting involved. Thank you for the good and insightful conversation as always. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you if everybody hit the like button. I appreciate that, and obviously you guys are pretty much all subscribers, so thank you. And I will see you on the next one. I am really looking to do one tomorrow. And it's probably gonna be um 1 hour before whatever your current time is right now. It's probably going to be around that time. And then we'll do a little bit of topical stuff in terms of, and we'll do a little bit of a match preview as well. So if you guys are going to be around for that, I'll schedule the show for you, like maybe an hour before, that way you can see that it's up there, and we'll be back. So Everybody have a good night, good morning, good evening from wherever you're watching. Thank you. Appreciate you guys all. And we will see you later. Take care. Stay safe and be good.